That's funny. But then again, we are with the funny man himself.
He's not loud. He's not impressed easily. Steven Seagal watches, waits, then speaks. And when he does, it's never small talk.
He was a great man.
Oh, the crazy guy from Arizona.
He's not crazy, he's a great man.
For decades, Seagal built a legacy on silence, strength, and control. He's made entire rooms freeze with one glance. But behind the black belts and brutal takedowns is a man who does admire others. You just have to listen carefully, because when Seagal gives someone praise, it means something. Not talent alone, not fame. He looks for power you can't fake, presence you feel before the first word. Actors who don't act, they are. He respects stillness. He respects energy. He respects those who've been through it. Hard to kill, above the law, out for justice. His films explode on screen, but the actors he respects move like shadows. The kind who say everything without a single word. When someone earns that nod from Seagal, it's like being knighted in a dojo. He doesn't hand out compliments. He gives recognition of truth, of spirit, of real strength.
And he seems like a real good guy.
He's worked with legends, trained with killers, but only a few ever entered his world and stayed there. These weren't just actors, they were warriors. Here are the 6 Seagal holds highest, and no one's ever replaced them. Number 1. Clint Eastwood. Some actors inspire careers. Clint Eastwood built one that became a blueprint. Before Seagal ever stepped in front of a camera, he studied Eastwood, the way he moved, the way he paused. Seagal once said Eastwood had a kind of presence you don't learn, you're born with. Not just cool, not just tough, something unshakable. Eastwood once said, "Sometimes if you want to see a change for the better, you have to take things into your own hands." To Seagal, that wasn't just a line, that was law. Eastwood was the silent storm, the kind of actor who didn't raise his voice but still made the ground move. It's the same energy Seagal built his own roles on: stoicism, strength, and total focus. The admiration was never loud, but it ran deep. Seagal once said about Eastwood, "He never tries to act, he just is. That's what makes him dangerous." Eastwood's filmography is the stuff of legend: Dirty Harry, High Plains Drifter, Unforgiven, Gran Torino. But what struck Seagal wasn't the violence, it was the stillness, the patience. When others rushed a scene, Eastwood waited. When others raised a fist, he tilted his head, and said more with a look than most with a speech. Eastwood didn't give long speeches on set, he trusted instincts. That's something Seagal carried into every film, whether walking into a bar full of enemies or confronting corruption in a suit. It's that quiet command that echoes Eastwood's DNA.
A visionary guy, a great guy. I'm proud to be working with him, and I think it's going to be a good show.
Eastwood also directed the way he acted: focused, efficient, almost invisible. Crews often said he ran his sets like jazz, no yelling, no wasted movement. That stayed with Seagal. Eastwood once said, "Respect your efforts, respect yourself. Self-respect leads to self-discipline. When you have both, you have real power." It wasn't about swagger, it was about gravity. That's why Seagal didn't imitate Eastwood, he absorbed him. And even now you can see it, in how he enters a room, in how he pauses before a punch, in how silence does the heavy lifting. For Seagal, Eastwood wasn't just a favorite actor, he was a silent mentor. And that shadow still stretches across every frame Seagal ever filmed. Number 2. Toshiro Mifune. When Steven Seagal talks about martial arts, he doesn't just mention technique, he talks about spirit. And when he talks about actors, there's one name that bridges both worlds: Toshiro Mifune. Mifune didn't just play samurai, he was one. His performances in Akira Kurosawa's classics, Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, Throne of Blood, define the warrior archetype for global cinema. And for Seagal, they hit somewhere deeper. Seagal once said, "Mifune had the spirit of Bushido in his eyes." That's not acting, that's transmission. Seagal has often expressed deep respect for Japanese culture, not just through Aikido, but in how he carries himself on screen. And no actor embodied that cultural essence more than Mifune. There's a certain intensity Mifune brought, stillness loaded with threat, movement guided by purpose. It wasn't stylized violence, it was clarity. Akira Kurosawa once described Mifune like this: a lion, an animal, fierce, instinctive, and pure. That's the same instinct Seagal studies in every performance. not a rehearsed response, but an embodied presence. You see it when Seagal enters a scene without saying a word, and the tension shifts. That's Mifune's influence. Seagal reportedly watched Yojimbo dozens of times while training in Japan. He studied Mifune's posture, rhythm, how he held a sword, and more importantly, how he held silence. To Seagal, silence is where the power lives.
I wanted to learn the martial arts. I wanted to learn healing, herbology.
It's not just admiration, it's alignment. Both men believed in a kind of energy you carry, not just perform. Neither smiled often, neither wasted motion, neither chased the camera. Mifune once said, "To master swordplay is to master stillness. Once you know that, fear leaves you." That idea shaped Seagal's screen identity. He never needed noise to be dangerous. He walked in, read the room, and stayed grounded while chaos swirled around him. That's not Hollywood instinct, that's old-school discipline, and it came from men like Mifune. Mifune passed in 1997, but for Seagal, his presence hasn't faded. It echoes in movement, in posture, in silence. He wasn't just an actor, he was a code, and Seagal never broke it. Number 3. Sean Connery. Some actors command respect. Sean Connery didn't have to. It followed him. To Steven Seagal, Connery wasn't just James Bond. He was a standard, a force of nature in a suit. The kind of man who didn't bluff, didn't beg, and didn't need to prove a thing. And the respect was mutual, earned, not given. Seagal once said, "When Sean walked in, the whole room changed. You didn't act tougher, you just got quiet." They met during the production of The Presidio. Seagal had been brought on to train Connery in Aikido for a scene. What followed became legend. During a wrist lock demonstration, Seagal moved too fast. Connery didn't flinch, but Seagal accidentally broke his wrist. Connery kept filming. Years later, Connery spoke about it with a grin. No resentment, just respect. Connery reportedly said, "I learned not to mess with Steven, but I also learned he's the real thing." Seagal has never been one to lavish praise, but when Connery's name comes up, there's a different tone. Not awe, not nostalgia, just acknowledgement, like one warrior recognizing another. Both men shared more than martial arts. They shared presence, weight, that ability to fill silence without needing to raise a brow.
Now, are you sure you want to have a fight? Because I'm only going to use my thumb.
They didn't work together beyond that film, but Seagal often pointed to Connery as a rare example of toughness with elegance, strength without ego, and in a world full of posturing, Connery just was. Seagal once reflected, he didn't need to yell, he didn't need to flex, and that's why he was dangerous. Connery defined the original Bond, but off-screen, he was sharper, quieter, and far more disciplined than most realized. He didn't live in the spotlight. He stepped into it, owned it, and walked away when it no longer served him. Seagal, who's often accused of staying too long in the fight, admired that, the timing, the restraint. Connery left the business on his own terms. No comeback tours, no social media, just silence. That in itself was powerful. He wasn't just a man of action, he was a man of principle. And for Seagal, that made him unforgettable. Number 4. Jean-Claude Van Damme. For years, Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme were painted as rivals. Different styles, different philosophies. But underneath the headlines and bar talk, there was something else. Respect. Seagal may have questioned Van Damme's flash, but he never questioned his discipline, his speed, his raw dedication to the craft of movement. Behind closed doors, Seagal once admitted, he trains like it's life or death. That kind of focus? You feel it before he throws a single kick. Van Damme came from a ballet background, precision, balance, structure, but he translated that into on-screen chaos with films like Bloodsport, Kickboxer, and Hard Target. He made violence look poetic. That's something Seagal quietly always understood. Not just muscle, but rhythm. The infamous 1990s Hollywood party story, where Van Damme allegedly challenged Seagal to a fight, has been told 100 different ways. What's less known is what Seagal said afterward. He's a real fighter. Maybe not like me, but real just the same. That's not something Seagal says lightly. He's worked with hundreds of stuntmen, martial artists, and screen fighters. But Van Damme earned his own category, not because of what he said, but because of how long he lasted. Longevity in action cinema is rare, but Van Damme's stayed in the game through injuries, budget cuts, comebacks, and more. And according to people close to Seagal, that's what finally shifted his opinion. Van Damme evolved. He took roles that made fun of himself. JCVD, The Expendables 2. He dropped the ego. And that's when Seagal saw something different. Seagal once said in a radio interview, "There's a strength in reinvention." Jean-Claude figured that out. That's why he's still here. They never did work together. Too much noise, too many cameras. But the respect was there. Maybe they were never friends. But they were mirrors, reflecting different sides of the same discipline. Balance, silence, power. One rooted in internal control, the other external force. For Seagal, that contrast didn't breed competition. It created curiosity. And somewhere along the way, rivalry gave way to recognition. Number 5. Jet Li. Steven Seagal doesn't use the word master lightly. But when it comes to Jet Li, that's exactly what he sees. They've never done a film together. No on-screen duels, no choreographed standoffs. But to Seagal, Jet Li doesn't need the same space to earn respect, because what he brings isn't just technique, it's presence. Seagal once said, Jet Li moves like he's already won. He doesn't fight the fight. He ends it before it begins. Jet Li was trained in wushu from a young age, a national champion by his teens, but it was the way he carried himself in films like Once Upon a Time in China, Hero, and Fearless that earned him global respect, not just from fans, but from fighters like Seagal. It wasn't about the flash, it was about the stillness before the flash. Jet Li understood how to hold a beat, how to stay centered. That's what Seagal noticed. The way Jet Li channels internal energy, chi, breathing, balance, mirrors much of what Seagal studied in Aikido. Both believe in using an opponent's force against them. Both believe in finishing a moment before it escalates. Jet Li once said in an interview, "Real power is invisible. You don't see it, but you feel it." Seagal has pointed out that many martial artists lose their edge when they get to Hollywood. They chase effects, not essence. But Jet Li, he kept the discipline intact. Every punch had purpose. Every movement was connected to something deeper. Their philosophies may come from different roots, but they both stem from the same core, control through stillness. Seagal once put it like this, Jet doesn't just move, he shifts the energy in the room. That's the difference. That level of quiet mastery stuck with Seagal. He's praised Jet Li not just for being deadly on screen, but for staying humble off it. No scandals, no posturing, just work, just flow. They've never shared a scene. But when Seagal talks about the few actors who get it, Jet Li's name always shows up. Because for a man who believes in energy, precision, and presence, Jet Li doesn't need dialogue. He speaks the same language without saying a word. Number 6. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee never made a film with Steven Seagal, but in Seagal's world, that didn't matter. Respect doesn't always require collaboration. Sometimes it only takes presence. For Seagal, Bruce wasn't just a martial artist, he was a code, a living example of what happens when physicality, philosophy, and presence align. Seagal once said, Bruce was ahead of his time, maybe ahead of all of us. Bruce Lee's screen time was short, The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Enter the Dragon, but his impact was massive. His movements were fast, fluid, and exact, but it was the intention behind them that stuck. Seagal noticed. While others mimicked Bruce's speed, Seagal studied his pauses, the way he moved between strikes, the stillness that made each attack feel like a decision, not a reflex. What impressed Seagal most wasn't the choreography, it was the mindset. Bruce didn't teach style, he taught adaptability. He believed in being like water, changing form without losing force. Bruce Lee famously said, "Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water." Seagal, trained in Aikido, came from a different lineage, but the core was the same. Redirection over resistance, energy over brute strength, stillness over flash. They never met. But Seagal has said that Bruce's writing, his essays, interviews, and intent influenced him just as much as the films. Bruce wasn't trying to entertain, he was trying to reveal, and Seagal listened. Seagal once explained, Bruce made people see martial arts as more than just fighting. He made it about who you are. There was no rivalry, no jealousy, just reverence. Seagal didn't try to become the next Bruce Lee, because he knew there wouldn't be one. Bruce was a phenomenon, a brief, brilliant flame that changed how the world saw movement, power, and identity. And for Seagal, who built his legacy on control, Bruce Lee remains the one figure who needed none of it to dominate. He didn't chase the light. He was the light. That's why, to this day, when Seagal's asked who reshaped the idea of what an action star could be, his answer never changes. Bruce. Seagal didn't hand out compliments. He didn't play the Hollywood game. He watched, he listened, and if you earned his respect, you felt it. Quietly, but permanently. No applause, no press release, just a shift in the air. These six, they weren't just co-stars or idols, they were reflections. Of discipline, of presence, of power that didn't need noise. Each one showed him something rare, and in return, he never forgot them. Most actors chase the spotlight, but Seagal looked for the ones who already carried it, the ones who could walk into a scene without saying a word and still own it. So, who do you think almost made that list? Or maybe should have? Drop your pick in the comments, and if you want access to the deeper side of Seagal's story and other legends like him, make sure you're subscribed. The member-only zone? That's where the real names live, the forgotten names, the buried truths, because in Seagal's world fame didn't earn you his respect, stillness did, and once you had it, you stayed.